it's Mia here, and welcome back once again to another bookish video. Now this is going to be an actual book review, where I know a lot of my book videos lately have been book hauls or book unhauls. This is actually a review. And I actually had to take notes for this one because there were so many different characters, and you know how I am about a lot of characters. But let's get into this. The book that I read this time is actually the 7-in-1 full series Chronicles of Narnia giant book, which comes out to a grand total of 767 pages. And I don't know about you guys when you read, but I think that I definitely get what I'm going to call long book fatigue. And it seems like every time I read a book that's more than 500 pages, my brain's like, okay, we're done with this now, right? I can move on and read another book that I've been really wanting to read. Which, if you're like me, and you have a bad habit of getting new books and immediately wanting to start those new books, regardless of what book you're in the middle of, that's a struggle to get through a book this big. Now, this is a series that for the longest time was calling my name, and I was like, I'm at the bookstore anyway, I might as well look for it and see if they have it, and lo and behold, they did. And before I get into, talking about the characters and which books out of this were my favorite, or, the plots of it, this is going to be, a very quick review, because I'm not going to go too in-depth into each of the stories, because technically it's one book altogether. So I'm going to talk about different stuff I enjoyed and my favorite and least favorite of the books in this book. So I'm not going to go too deep into it, so don't expect that. So the first thing I noticed from this series was that C.S. Lewis's writing, is absolutely comforting and home feeling. It feels like I'm a child who was just tucked in bed on a cold winter's night with the fire going on the other side of the room, and my grandfather has sat down with me in bed to tell me this beautiful bedtime story to help, to tell me fascinating fairy tales and to help lull me into sleep. But that is what he does with his writing. He makes it feel very comfortable and very well done. And I love it. It's just a relaxing read, and it kind of sucks you in because you feel very at home with his writing, because it does feel very much like a grandfather telling you a bedtime story. So with that, this book decides not to start with the Chronicles of Narnia as the first one, even though technically Chronicles of Narnia is the first one. Instead, they decided to start with The Magician's Nephew, which doesn't even focus on Lucy, Edmund, Peter, and Susan, who are the main four of Chronicles of Narnia. The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. I always called it Chronicles of Narnia, so it's weird having to call it The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. But instead, the Magician's Nephew focuses on a boy named Diggory, a girl named Polly, and the boy's uncle named Andrew. And like I said, I had to take notes because a lot of characters get me messed up. But Diggory, living in England with Polly, lives in this kind of apartment complex where all the houses are connected. And one day, he gets tired of being locked in the house, or his aunt telling him to stay away from his crazy uncle, who he lives with. And his mom is sick, so she's there in the picture too. But his aunt's always telling him, oh, stay away from your crazy uncle, stay away from your crazy uncle. And one day, he and his friend Polly are kind of bored and hey, let's crawl through the walls and the vent systems, which were small enough to fit in, and check out this empty house, this empty apartment, and maybe that could be our place to play and hang out. Well, they do that, and they accidentally end up stumbling into the Forbidden Uncle's study, which they are not allowed into. They're supposed to stay away from the crazy uncle. But then he ends up going on about this ranting and ravings of how he lost guinea pigs and these experiments are such failures that he's doing. And the kids are like, wow, he really is crazy. What is he talking about? And he has these rings, a couple gold ones and a couple green ones. I almost said yellow ones, but a couple gold ones and a couple green ones. Now, the gold ones are supposed to transport you to somewhere, and the green ones are supposed to bring you back. And the way the uncle explains this is that his great-great-great-great-great-great grandfather or grandmother or great aunt was a fairy and worked with fairies and stuff like that. So the rings were made with the dust of a fairy or fairy dust. So that's how they're able to transport you from one place and back again. So he ends up tricking Polly into taking the yellow ring, and she ends up getting transported away. And Diggory's like, oh no. And so he's forced by his uncle to go and get Polly, his friend, only to come into this, pocket dimension in between worlds. And that's how they discover Narnia, which has just been created from the dust of the earth and from the darkness by Aslan. Aslan then brings the talking animals to fruition and then gives them the dumb animals to rule over and protect, which I've heard that Aslan is a Jesus lion before, but nowhere is that more apparent than in The Magician's Nephew, because he's literally raising talking animals above the dumb animals, which is literally what they call them in the book, the dumb, stupid animals that can't talk. So it talks about how because the world of Narnia is so new, that whatever you plant there will grow. That's how the lamppost came to be. Because when Diggory and Polly were trying to get out, they ended up going to a different world, a different dimension, and that's where the White Witch comes from. She was this ruler of this dark land. She was frozen in stone. They ended up bringing her out of it, finding out she was psychotic, and then tried to get away, but she followed them, not only following them to England, where she stole a lamppost after beating some people senseless, but then jumping to Narnia, where it fell and grew into the lamppost we see in the story. That's the landmark for the wardrobe. But then, after all those adventures, they come back. Diggory decides, I'm going to take what's left of these fairy dust and make a wardrobe out of it, which is then how Lucy, Edmund, Susan, and Peter find their way into Narnia, Lucy being the first of the four to do so. Even though they don't believe her, they think it's just a child's imagination run wild because she's trapped in a new place and she's bored. Now, once they start to learn that the Chronicles that Narnia is real, they go in and they talk to this fawn that Lucy met. And Edmund, being Edmund, who had run into the White Witch before lying about being there with Lucy, the second time anyway, he's entranced because she ate her food. And this was not clear in the movie, really, that the only reason he wanted to come back was because the food was enchanted. Yeah, she made it out of a drop of water, but it never explicitly told you that he was spelled by the food. So, in this, we get to see his real motivations for wanting to go back to the witch so bad, because I'm like, how does he like her when she seems like such a creepy person? But then, in trying to get their brother back, they go through all of these adventures and rising from kids to warriors, and then from warriors to kings, when they help defeat her in the final battle. Although, I feel like the movie did the battle better, but I'll go back and rewatch it when I do the review for it, because once I read a book, I usually read the movie that goes with it. So, they have their grand adventure in Narnia. They defeat the White Witch, expelling the winter. with the help of Aslan, the Jesus lion. Then they are sent back to their world, and Peter and Susan are told that their days in Narnia may be numbered. But the thing about Narnia is you never know how much time it has passed in Narnia versus how much time has passed in our world. A year in our world could be anywhere from 3 years to 3 centuries in Narnia. You just never know what time period you're going to pop in to in Narnia. You could come back to everyone you knew in Narnia being dead and gone for a long time. And that's a way that C.S. Lewis keeps the story moving, and like, you never know if anyone's going to know of the stories, or if they're just going to think they're fairy tales, or they're going to be like, hey, Susan, Edmund, yo, you're back. Like, you never know what it's going to be. They could have friends that are still there, or they could come back to their friend dying of old age when it's been a year in their world. Time in Narnia does not flow the same here, and it's never predictable how much time has passed. And then we come to The Horse and the Boy. And The Horse and the Boy was probably my least favorite of the bunch because it focuses on an orphan fisherman's slave boy and a runaway princess who doesn't want to get married, Arvis. The boy's name is Shasta, because I forgot to mention that. And 2 Narnia horses, H-Win and Bree. Now, this story is set in a different land of Narnia. Like, there's Narnia, and then there's, like, Trezarin? I don't know how to say fantasy names, but there's this whole other realm, and these ones are ruled by man, and it turns out that this boy Shasta is tired of his life, and one day this general comes to his fishing place where it stinks and it's gross, and he asks for room and board because he and his horse have been traveling for a long time. But then the horse is like, hey boy, let's get out of here. I can tell you don't want to be here any more than I do, just please let me go. And he goes, you're talking, a horse is talking to me, what is happening, what? And he goes, I'm a Narnian horse. I'm a talking beast. I'm not one of these stupid, dumb horses that roll around like stupid and love the humans. I'm a free Narnian, and I'd like to be that again. So, with Shasta's help, Bree and Shasta both escape the fisherman's lair. He's not a villain, but a fisherman's hut. And they end up going on this journey to get back to Narnia so Shasta can be free, and so Bree can be a free Narnian horse again. Along the way, they end up meeting up with Arvis, the princess of this Temerian place. I cannot say the name for the life of me. Then her horse also turns out to be a talking Narnian horse by the name of H-Win or He-Win, or however you say her name. It might just be Win with the H silent. I don't know. Fantasy names are weird. But they work together going through the story, and in this one, Peter, Edmund, Susan, and Lucy are more like background characters. They're there for a moment, and it turns out that Shasta is not only a prince, but the prince's twin that went missing. So he ended up being an actual prince of Narnia at that point. Not above Susan, Lucy, and Peter, and Edmund, and all them, but below them. He's a lower king, a lower prince. So he ends up taking his rightful place on the throne after a battle to get it back. And that's that story. And I feel like it was very separate because it was more of like a journey go-along camping thing. And then we had Prince Caspian. And this is where Susan, Lucy, and Edmund and Peter's annoying cousin, Eustace, comes into the picture. And I remember in the movie he was absolutely insufferable know-it-all. And he is more so in the book. Like, the first time they go to Narnia, it's with the rings. The second time they go to Narnia, it's with the wardrobe. The third time they went to Narnia, it was with Susan had gotten this horn when she was in Narnia. Peter got a shield and a sword. Lucy got her healing cordial and a dagger. Susan got a bow and a horn to summon help whenever she may need it. So Caspian, the now Prince of Narnia, had gotten a hold of Susan's horn and had blown it, and it summoned them back into the world of Narnia. At least, and then the fourth time, when Eustace was brought into the picture, they were actually dragged into Narnia through a painting of a similar Narnian-looking ship that was hanging up in the attic where Lucy was staying and their aunts. There was this whole flood where the water was coming through the painting, and it was just crazy. So, the way they get into Narnia never happens the same way twice, and that just goes to prove that it's more magic than we first originally thought, and you don't need the wardrobe to get there. It just depends on when Narnia needs you or when you need Narnia. It'll be there when it needs you the most or when you need it the most. So, Caspian, who is now Prince of Narnia, is going on this journey to find 7 lords that his father sent to exile. And so he is aboard a ship called the Dawn Dreader, and with his crew. So they join them on their adventure, and this book gets a little dark for a kid's book. It's these dark lands with all these evil beings, and like there's this table that they come to where they find 3 of the 7 lords in this frozen sleep, and they can't do anything about it to get them out. And they're traveling through these words to find these lords, and the story gets dark, it gets a little creepy, and one of the other lords that they end up having to find goes to the stone table where they are put to sleep as well because he's old and frail. And then Rip-a-Jeep, a little mouse that is like the second in command, ends up going into the end of the world, or Aslan's country, because he, as a fair mouse, wanted to join Aslan. Then we come to the Silver Chair, which is it's just Eustace and Polly, who Polly is a friend of Eustace who is getting bullied in school, and he's just not having it, and the bullies are coming after them, so they have to flee from them, and they end up getting called into Narnia to help out once again. So it's another way of them getting pulled into Narnia. They called out to it, and then they end up going into the deep caverns under Narnia where they find like this serpent trying to say that Narnia doesn't exist and that there's no world above the underground, and it's really creepy. And then we have the Silver Chair, where a prince calls to the land outside of Narnia for help after his kingdom has been lied to and thought that Aslan was back, because Aslan has been gone so long at this point that he is thought to be myth. So they have to bust the imposters, and this is all-out war between the ones trying to take completely over and deal with all that. It's a great story with many different characters that I had to write down to keep track of, but it was really good, and it kind of sucks that I get long book syndrome and feel like 500 pages is my stopping point, but I genuinely enjoyed this book. I enjoyed its writing, I enjoyed the pacing, I enjoyed the whole thing, and I thought it was really good. And I'm sorry this review kind of sped through everything, because not only was I trying to avoid spoilers, but I was trying to talk about 7 different books and make it sound coherent without being here for 2 hours. So that is it for me. I'll shut up now, and I hope to see you next time. Bye, guys.